Superhuman abilities. Quote, all speech, action, and behavior are fluctuations of consciousness. All life emerges from and is sustained in consciousness. The whole universe is the expression of consciousness. The reality of the universe is one unbounded ocean of consciousness in motion. End quote. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. For many centuries, an essential claim of the occultists was that mental processes can be independent of the human body. Consciousness is not bound to the brain or the body, or so contended the yogis and esotericists. It has taken a long professional quest into the history of psychical research, Cold War remote viewing, and quantum physics in order for experts to arrive at a tentative conclusion and a gross understatement. Practitioners with demonstrable psychic abilities have, quote, extraordinary knowing, end quote. Those in the business call it the intuitive arts. A modern organization, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, studies this extraordinary knowing scientifically. Noetic is derived from the Greek term nous, a kind of interknowing which transcends intellect. It has been said that a question is not asked until the answer is known. Such is true for tapping into the full potential of a human being. Harnessing a mastery of consciousness has been an eternal quest. Countless spiritual, religious, and secret societies have attempted to master the human mind. Spiritual gurus contend that just about anything is possible with the proper training. How much can we possibly accomplish? For starters, we can make speed mental computations, become a human calculator device, have a superpower memory, develop a photographic speed reading capacity, or obtain excellent mental or physical athletic abilities are all in the realm of possible. The key is to exercise your brain and train your mind. Superhuman mental abilities have been researched by the KGB, British intelligence, and various American spy agencies for about a century as a way to manipulate each other. These human experiments reached a fevered pitch during the Cold War. Telepathy, telekinesis, and other important experiments of the mind were recorded and sometimes utilized for nefarious purposes. But the findings never resulted in much strategic benefit and were ultimately stopped. It is very difficult to manipulate someone with advanced mental capacities without a pure heart. Some extraordinary human abilities used to control others are considered the dark sciences, largely because a person being manipulated typically loses their free will. Mind control is one example, a phenomenon encompassing all the ways in which personal, social, and institutional forces are exerted to induce compliance, conformity, belief, attitude, and value change in others. Mind control techniques, however, are never ethical without the full consent of the individual. Sagan speaks. Dr. Carl Sagan was a noted astronomer, scientist, author, and paranormal skeptic. Sagan was a founding member of a group that set out to debunk unscientific claims, but he surprisingly found merit in certain paranormal categories. He wrote the book, The Demon Haunted World, in which he remarked that there are several areas in parapsychology which deserve serious study. This statement by Sagan admirers is largely ignored. Sagan wrote, quote, "At the time of writing, there are 3 claims in the ESP field which, in my opinion, deserves serious study. 1, that by thought alone humans can barely affect random number generators in computers. 2, that people under mild sensory deprivation can receive thoughts or images projected at them. And 3, that young children sometimes report the details of a previous life, which upon checking turn out to be accurate, and which they could not have known about in any other way other than reincarnation. I pick these claims not because I think they're likely to be valid, I don't, but as examples of contentions that might be true," end quote. Carl Sagan also commented on mirror organisms, or the possibility of life existing in the higher dimensions. Quote, "If a 4th dimensional creature existed, it could, in our 3-dimensional universe, appear and dematerialize at will, change shape remarkably, pluck us out of locked rooms, and make us appear from nowhere. It could also turn us inside out," end quote. These are interesting observations from a known skeptic. If we take Sagan's research to the next level, perhaps the ultimate result will be for us to become multidimensional, psychic, astral voyaging, and time-traveling superhumans. Receiving thoughts and images. There have been and remain many dubious sciences of the mind bent on controlling or conditioning other people. Mind control or brainwashing refers to a broad range of psychological tactics that are able to subvert an individual's control of his or her own thinking, behavior, emotions, actions, or decisions. This concept is closely related to hypnosis, but differs in practical approach. Hypnosis is the most basic of these control mechanisms. It has been considered a dark science since before Moses' time. The concepts of hypnotic suggestion or pointing the bone in voodoo traditions, speaking in tongues, or even demonic possession all relate to mind control, sometimes with, but usually without, the subject's permission. Current theories of hypnosis, however, hold that it is impossible using hypnosis to induce individuals to behave in ways that are contrary to their wishes or ethics. A contemporary view of mind control explains it as an intensified and persistent use of well-researched social psychology principles like compliance, conformity, persuasion, dissonance, reticence, framing, or emotional manipulation. Mind control is the process by which the individual or collective freedom of choice and action is compromised by agents that can modify or distort perception, motivation, affect cognition, or dictate behavioral outcomes. It is neither magical nor mystical, but is a process that involves a set of basic socio-psychological principles. Pavlovs Dogs, an insight into the conditioning of mammals, was performed in 1927 by the Russian researcher Ivan Pavlov, who experimented on stimulus response mechanisms with dogs. The typical procedure for inducing classical conditioning involved presentations of a neutral stimulus along with a stimulus of some significance called the unconditional stimulus. The original and most famous example of classical conditioning involved the salivary conditioning of Pavlov's dogs. During his research on the physiology of digestion in dogs, Pavlov noticed that rather than simply salivating in the presence of food, the dogs began to salivate in the presence of the lab technician who is feeding them regularly. Pavlov called these psychic secretions. From this observation, he predicted that if a particular stimulus in the dog's surroundings were present when the dog was presented with meat, then the stimulus would become associated with food and cause salivation on its own. In his initial experiment, Pavlov used a bell to call the dogs to their meal, and after a few repetitions, the dogs started to salivate in response to the bell, whether food was present or not. In 1957, British psychiatrist William Sargent published one of the first books on the psychology of brainwashing, entitled Battle for the Mind. Sargent connected Pavlov's findings to the ways people learn and internalize their own belief systems. Conditioned behavior patterns could be changed by stimulus stresses beyond a dog's or a person's capacity for response, in essence causing a breakdown. These stresses could include longer than normal waiting periods, rotating positive and negative signals, and changing a creature's physical condition, as through illness. Depending on the creature's initial personality, these techniques could cause a new belief system to be held tenaciously. Sargent also connected Pavlov's findings to the mechanisms of brainwashing in religion and politics. Under severe or prolonged stress, the mind can change radically, profoundly, and with lasting results. In all cases, Sargent concluded, it's a manifestation of a normal psychological process by the brain of accommodation to circumstances, which under severely abnormal circumstances can result in very surprising and strange accommodations indeed. When the mind is in such a wiped stage, it can be reconstructed in many ways. Brainwashers, Sargent shows, use this compromised mental state to get people to do things they normally would never even consider. Sargent concluded, quote, "Though men are not dogs, they should humbly try to remember how much they resemble dogs in their brain functions and not boast themselves as demigods. They are gifted with religious and social apprehensions, and they are gifted with the power of reason. But all these faculties are psychologically entailed to the brain. Therefore, the brain should not be abused by having forced upon it any religious or political mystique that stunts the reason, or any form of crude rationalism that stunts the religious sense," end quote. Mind control. William Sargant and Dr. Ewan Cameron of Project MKUltra, notoriety, were friends and colleagues. The two exchanged views and information on brainwashing and de-patterning techniques, along with their mutual research in these areas. Both men had extensive CIA and British Secret Intelligence Service connections. One aim of Cameron, Sargent, and the CIA's research programs during the Cold War was to find ways to obliterate the memories of Allied spies, called de-patterning, and then implement false memories at a deep level so that if a spy were captured in his adoptive country, he would be incapable, under duress or even torture, of revealing his true American or British allegiance. He would only be able to reveal the falsely implanted memories that supported his assumed persona. This concept was dubbed the Manchurian Candidate after the popular novel and film. The extensive use of heroic doses of electron convulsive shock treatments combined with the narcosis deep sleep treatment, antidepressants, tape loops, insulin coma therapy, and other drugs in this context were designed to induce catastrophic memory loss, which then would be replaced with false memories and ideas. These ideas were given to the subject via tape loops, hypnosis, LSD, or conversations with the person while they were drugged. Different forms of mind manipulation continue to the present day. The space between our ears may be the newest battleground in the conflict between privacy and technology. A new technique called hypersonic sound, or HSS, projection enables sound to be directed precisely to one individual without any spillover. A person only needs to be standing in the path of an HSS beam in order to hear the sound. The sensation to those hearing the sound is that of its being projected from inside their skull. If HSS can already be used on Earth, which has been using electricity for only 150 years, imagine a technology that has been refined over thousands of years or more. This advanced technology could conceivably transmit thoughts that are precisely targeted to an individual person across vast expanses of outer space. Telepathy. According to Wikipedia, telepathy derives from the Greek word tele, meaning remote, and pathia, meaning to be affected by. The definition describes the purported transfer of information on thoughts or feelings between individuals by means other than the 5 classical senses. The term was coined in 1882 by the classical scholar Frederick W. H. Myers, a founder of the Society for Psychical Research, specifically to replace the earlier expression thought transference. Telepathy is a common theme in science fiction, with many superheroes and supervillains utilizing telepathic abilities. Such abilities include both sensing the thoughts of people and controlling the minds of others. A person who is able to make use of telepathy is said to be able to see into the minds of others and communicate without words being spoken. We already possess some form of telepathy in the form of facial expressions and recognizing patterns in others. But taken to its limit, telepathy can create a close mental link where it is possible to overshadow entirely or even possess the personality of another. Without the permission of another person, this is a form of mental manipulation called psychic parasite control. Telepathy as a form of communication already occurs in humans and animals. Most people are aware of facial cues, grunts, partial words, or reading the looks they get from other people. Transhumanists believe that technologically enabled telepathy, called techlepathy, will be the inevitable future of humanity. Proponents seek to develop practical, safe devices for directly connecting one human nervous system to another. Teleportation and force fields should not be confused with telepathy, although they all work under the same principles. Teleportation is used to dematerialize and materialize various sorts of objects. A force field relies on the behavior of electromagnetic fields, and this has been accomplished in laboratory tests. The term force field refers to the lines of force that one object, the source object, exerts on another object or a collection of other objects. An object might be a particle of mass or an electric or magnetic charge, for example. Remote viewing. A famous hypnosis experiment by Dr. Thomas Garrett in the 1930s was among the first to document the mental ability of a subject being hypnotized, in this case, the son of a famous Broadway playwright. The subject was able to leave his body and view a situation that was deeply troubling to him. The young man had a falling out with his fiancée from a Wellesley sorority. Under hypnosis, he was instructed to visit her sorority room and fly through her room, which he did while remote viewing. He found the girl at her desk, writing him a letter at that moment. He copied down the letter she was writing to him, attempting to reconcile their relationship. He dictated the letter to Dr. Garrett, who wrote it all down precisely. When the telegram came the next day, the two letters were almost identical. He was literally able to recite the letter remotely and provide proof to skeptics in the form of the two letters. Once remote viewing became accepted in the medical profession, the next extension of this technique was used for military applications. If they could train people to master these techniques and send agents remotely to spy on their enemies, there could be a big tactical advantage. Subjects were trained to soar above their own bodies and immediately realize that they were outside of their body, looking down from the ceiling at the top of the body's head. They soared higher and higher above until they arrived at the room they were going to study. Spy agencies around the world, as well as police detectives, now employ those with remote viewing abilities to successfully gather information or solve crimes. It works often enough to have become one of the tools for solving crimes. A Chinese remote viewing experiment using extra high functioning, that is EHF, psychics, was developed in a laboratory. In these experiments, subjects were able to remotely view a complex Chinese letter character in a completely dark, light-shielded room. When the target was being correctly viewed, the study scientists also reported 15,000 photons, which also appeared in the room. When the subject was accurately remote viewing the target, photons were sent into a particular area they were viewing and could then be measured. The Chinese concluded that there is a measurable energy that the astral body gives off when remote viewing. We all have the ability to access information this way, including the transmitting of visible photons. Our minds are the gateway or access point to consciousness and the entire universe. What if thoughts not only occur in the mind, but are broadcasting outwards like a satellite? Could the mind somehow tune into the source field, as described by author David Wilcock, that which is space, time, energy, matter, and biology, all created by a universal consciousness? Do we share consciousness with other forms of life on Earth? How about sentient beings beyond Earth? How about with the alleged source of life itself? Remote influencing. The goal of remote influencing is to suggest thoughts to other people using the subject's mind. In test studies, the ability of remote influencers to concentrate was improved. Physiological calming effects were reported, and those with chronic anxiety even felt calmer. This technique only seems to work with loving consciousness. It is not effective in trying to suggest other people do harm, although there seems to be some examples to the contrary. As is sometimes common in scientific discoveries, simultaneous developments can occur, as evidenced by a number of inventors who conceive the same idea simultaneously. The concept of multiple discovery is when several people invent the same item or make the same discovery at the same time. Calculus, the telephone, the theory of evolution, the oxygen molecule, color photography, logarithms, identification of sunspots in the 1600s, the conservation of energy, and decimal fractions were all discovered simultaneously around the world by different independent researchers. The thermometer had 6 different claims of invention at the same time. The telescope had 9 different claims. The steamboat had 5 different claims, and the typewriter had multiple claims. At least 148 examples were cataloged by 1922. As we are working on problems and we gain new insights, this somehow unconsciously projects out as remote influencing. It is as if those thoughts go into the global mind and others can access the information. The British biologist Rupert Sheldrake dubs this phenomenon, quote, morphic resonance or morphic fields, end quote. His research has documented this effect in animals, birds, and crossword puzzle enthusiasts. Over 500 scientifically controlled studies have proven that consciousness affects biology and electrical systems. Perhaps this is the explanation for people cursing at their computers or devices, and then those machines suddenly breaking down. With odds like this, there is less than 1 chance in a trillion that any other explanation exists. Yet, this is not a new concept at all. The Native Americans call this force Manitou, a way that humans can interact with the natural world and affect change. It is a term used to designate the spirit beings among the various Algonquin language groups. It refers to the concept of one aspect of the interconnection and balance of nature and life, similar to the East Asian concept of Chi or the Hindu concept of Brahman. The modern metaphysical document, A Course in Miracles, uses the term mind to represent the, quote, activating agent of spirit, supplying its creative energy, end quote. Furthermore, its definition of miracles is not that of amazing feats such as raising the dead or moving objects at a distance, but rather changing your mind. Such a shift from ego perception to seeing with spiritual vision. This deep inner shift might or might not manifest as physical changes to the eye, or even as extended human capacities, but nevertheless opens one up and one's spiritual or all-encompassing healing abilities at the deepest levels. Astral projection. People who were near death and revived, or actually pronounced dead and brought back to life, have reported various mystical experiences. These sensations are commonly reported as going into a tunnel and emerging in a region of light, being reunited with loved ones, or a profound sense of peace, all of which may suggest an existence beyond the grave. It would seem we all have an astral body floating around, living in the source field. The ancient Egyptians called this light body the Ka, and some could willingly leave their body and come back at their own choosing. Astral projection is the ability to access the gravity wave instantaneously and consciously leave the body. When someone goes from the waking state to an out-of-body state, there is always a cord connected back to the body. This silver cord is the lifeline between the astral body and the living body. Those with astral projection abilities can go forward or backward or sideways in time, or go wherever they wish to go if their minds are properly trained. Astral projection is also known as the lucid dreaming state while asleep, also called the near-death experience or the out-of-body experience, OBE. The trick is to be conscious of the experience. Spontaneous OBE can occur at any time, sometimes not by a person's choice, such as in a fatal accident when the spirit leaves the body and then returns. The astral experience gives us the opportunity to consciously explore beyond our limited physical senses. We can learn more about ourselves by recalling our past life experiences and remember the purpose of coming to this lifetime on Earth in the first place. It is also an opportunity to meet with your non-physical guides or guardian angels in person. Astral projection also allows the adept the sensation of flight. Other benefits include an overall feeling of well-being, reduction in hostility, amplified psychic abilities, accelerated personal development, inner calmness, a heightened quest for answers, increased respect for life, revitalized zest for life, meeting deceased loved ones, increased intelligence, memory recall, and most importantly, a personal understanding of life after death. Fear of death is simply the fear of the unknown. Once a person can astral project, they have the solid belief that their soul will live beyond the physical body. The pineal gland. The pineal gland is a very small endocrine gland located between the two hemispheres of the vertebrate brain. It was named after the pine cone because its shape and texture literally resemble a miniature pine cone. The pineal gland is found in the brain of all humans and animals with a spinal cord. It is located in the geometric center of the brain, a region long associated with attainment and restriction of knowledge. While the human pineal gland is only about the size of a single grain of rice, that's 5 to 8 millimeters long, it performs several functions that are extremely important to the human body. An entire chapter is devoted to the pineal gland in the companion book, Modern Esoteric Beyond Our Senses, by Brad Olsen. The information contained here is primarily related to how the pineal gland interfaces with the potential to assist us in activating our superhuman abilities. The pineal gland produces the serotonin derivative melatonin, a hormone that affects the modulation of wake and sleep patterns and seasonal functions. Melatonin is the natural sleep hormone that plays a vital role in every person's normal sleep function. Melatonin is not only necessary for proper sleep, but it also regulates the onset of puberty and fights against harmful free radicals. Melatonin can be taken as a supplement, or it can be found in food and drinks such as cherries, bananas, grapes, rice, herbs, olive oil, wine, certain cereals, and even beer. The pineal gland is activated by light. It works with the natural biorhythm of the body. One function of this mysterious gland is to work in harmony with the hypothalamus gland in directing the body's thirst, hunger, sexual desire, and biological clock that determines the body's aging. It is also called the pineal body, epiphysis cerebri, epiphysis, or the third eye, due to its resemblance to the human retina. It even has the internal connections of an eye within the brain. By being so uniquely situated in the brain, the pineal gland does appear to be a functioning third eye, complete with retinal tissue, and is directly wired into the visual cortex. The interior tissue has pine locates, just like rods and cones in the retina, wired into the visual cortex of the brain, exactly like eyeballs. It is located near the center of the brain, between the two hemispheres, tucked in a groove where the two rounded thalamic bodies join. The pineal gland contains a complete map of the visual field of the eyes. Mystical traditions have long realized that activating the pineal gland is a way to initiate supernatural powers or develop psychic talents. The image of a pine cone and the power of the pineal gland is featured in nearly all mystical traditions worldwide. Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Hindu, Maya, and even the Vatican have statues and imagery of a pine cone representing the pineal gland. This third eye produces our inner vision, or as Descartes described, the seat of the soul. Ancient Greeks thought it was the connection into all realms of thought, or a connecting link between the physical and spiritual realms. Quote, "If thy eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light," end quote, according to Matthew in the biblical verse 6:22. It is also a symbol of the all-seeing eye of Horus, the Babylon mystery school, and the spiritual third eye represented in many other traditions. Advanced mystical teachings of Sufi Islam, the Vatican, and Freemasonry all identify with the image of the third eye. It represents a lifting of the veil, or the raising of the curtain, and thus the adherent attaining enlightened consciousness. All are metaphors for the awakening of the pineal gland. The pineal gland appears to be the main access point between the astral body and the physical body. It seemingly collects impressions from the astral body, which we experience while dreaming, having an out-of-body experience, remote viewing, or in a near-death experience. Located in the exact center of the brain, the pineal gland is the physiological center that determines how psychic information is processed. This is likely how independent inventors could pick up direct information that other people were also thinking of, collectively working on the problem together, activating the multiple discovery effect. When a mystic has an out-of-body experience, he or she activates the pineal gland. The astral body is picking up on this in the source field, giving off photons when remote viewing and tapping into a universal data bank. Crystals in the water around the pineal gland are stimulated in darkness, activating an electromagnetic and EM shield around the water that can then open itself to the source field. EM activity feels like pressure, a buzzing sound, a crackling sound tone, or an acceleration feeling inside the mind. EM activity shields water inside the pineal gland from all electromagnetic effects in space and time. Water is then the direct conduit to space and time, or our parallel reality. Time is no longer linear in a local environment, and adherents can jump around in time. The situation is similar to remembering vivid or lucid REM dream states. The inner retina records visual imagery. This is also how remote viewing or lucid dreaming is done, in a half-conscious state. Well, we are just about up to the hour break. And I think I'll hold the reading right there, but when we come back in the next hour, we'll discuss hypercommunication. Also, Indigo Children, as well as bionic humans, and a case study on a man who does not eat food or drink water. We'll also discuss levitation, telekinesis, and let's assume there are other human types outside of Earth. What could we learn from them? Including channeled information via extraterrestrials. And we'll also talk about the images and captions at the back of the superhuman ability chapter. So we got a lot to come up and go through and cover in the next hour here on the Esoteric Circle. I hope you will join us and stay with us for that, because we are just about at the break here, and I want to hold it right there so that we don't have any conflicts with the station music or bumpers. That should be starting momentarily. But in the meantime, we are on the Esoteric Circle discussing superhuman abilities. These are those much vaunted after states that humans can achieve if indeed we are properly attuned and properly in a position to learn and become well acquainted with these superhuman abilities. Hypercommunication. In nature, hypercommunication has been utilized by animal species for millions of years. The organized flow of life in insects proves this point dramatically. Hypercommunication is a form of telepathy. As an example from nature, when a queen ant is separated from her colony, the remaining worker ants will continue building fervently according to her plan. However, if the queen ant is killed, even far away from the hive, all work in the colony stops. No ant will know what to do. Apparently, the queen transmits the building plans, even when she is far away. She can dictate the group consciousness with her subjects. She can be as far away as she wants, as long as she is alive. Such is the case with honeybees, which are also hypersensitive to odors, pheromones, tastes, and specific colors, including ultraviolet. Modern humans know hypercommunication on a much more subtle level called intuition. But we too can regain full use of it if we wish. Human DNA naturally attracts bits of information and passes them on to our consciousness. This process of hypercommunication, which is really telepathy and channeling, is most effective in a calm state of relaxation. Stress, worry, or a hyperactive intellect can prevent successful hypercommunication. In a state of agitation, the information transferred will be totally distorted and useless. Human DNA has been described as a biological internet and superior in many aspects to the artificial one. Russian scientific research has been investigating the scientific basis for phenomena such as hypercommunication, clairvoyance, intuition, spontaneous and remote acts of healing, self-healing, affirmations, techniques, unusual lights or auras around people, namely spiritual masters, the mind's influence on weather patterns, and much more. Russian biophysicist Pjor Gajarev claims that this communication, used with conscious intention, is not something that is triggered only inside the individual cells or between one cell and another. He claims organisms use this light to talk to other organisms and suggests that this could explain telepathy and ESP. It is like human beings already have their own wireless internet based on our DNA. In addition, there is evidence for a whole new type of medicine connected to this hypercommunication ability, in which DNA can be influenced and reprogrammed by words and frequencies without cutting out and replacing single genes. This influence appears to have something to do with electromagnetic fields, because the side effect encountered most often in hypercommunication is mysterious electromagnetic fields in the vicinity of the persons concerned. Russian scientists irradiated DNA samples with laser light. On screen, a typical wave pattern was formed. When they removed the DNA sample, the wave pattern did not disappear, it remained. Numerous replicating experiments showed that the pattern still came from the removed sample, whose energy field apparently remained by itself. This is now called the phantom DNA effect. It is surmised that energy from outside of space-time still flows through the activated wormholes after the DNA is removed. On the practical level, these inexplicable electromagnetic fields appear to operate around electronic devices, such as MP3 players, computers, and digital recorders, rendering them inoperable for minutes or hours. Many healers and psychics know this effect from their work. The better the atmosphere and the energy, the more frustrating it is that the recording device stops functioning exactly at that moment. Often, repeated switching on and off after the session does not restore function, but the next morning all is back to normal. Perhaps this is reassuring for many, as it has nothing to do with being technically inept, but it simply means one is good at hypercommunication. The Indigo Children. In one of many similar studies, New England's James Flynn substantiates the raw IQ scores have been going up 3 points a decade all around the globe for over a century. Advances in literacy cannot explain this, as it is occurring in illiterate countries as well. This does not mean that we have better brains, just a different brain with rerouted neural circuits. It means every generation is becoming smarter than previous generations, mutating as it were, leading to a restructuring of our DNA and our brains. Human DNA evolution is now moving 100 times faster than it has in the last 5,000 years, according to Dr. John Hawkes. He reports that human DNA molecule is now fully 7% different than it was in 3000 BCE worldwide. The term Indigo Children was conceived by parapsychologist Nancy Ann Tappy, who began noticing that many children were being born with indigo auras, or as she described, their life colors. These life colors are carried in their auras and associated with the third eye chakra, which represent intuition and psychic ability. These gifted children may be the next stage in human evolution, and 2 new DNA blocks called microcephalin and ASPM are triggered in these adolescents. These genes regulate brain growth and provide a broader spectrum of thinking and a newer way of learning. Some of these children are being born smarter, more than twice the IQ of an average person who is the same age, and close to adult genius status. Some indigo children are known to possess paranormal abilities such as telepathy, telekinesis, and remote viewing. These results came from studies on young Chinese children who are called, quote, China's super psychics, end quote. Indigo children are described as more empathic, and creative than their peers, and often promote the concept of unity and oneness. The first wave of indigo children began in the early 1970s, and even more are being born today. The label attention deficit disorder, or ADD, describes either a very empathic and compassionate child or a very cold and callous one. Some child psychologists see a parallel between the new generation of gifted kids and the increase of autism, ADD, and ADHD diagnoses in American children. These children are sometimes rebellious to authority, nonconformist, impulsive, and extremely emotional. They can be physically sensitive or fragile, highly talented or academically gifted. Still others are metaphysically gifted, usually highly intuitive, and are wise beyond their years. They can see, hear, or know things that seem unexplainable. Something within the indigo children seems to be striving more and more towards a new kind of group consciousness, one that can no longer be suppressed. As a rule, for example, the weather is rather difficult to influence by a single individual, but it may be influenced by group consciousness. If this seems shocking, think of Aboriginal or Native American tribes performing their rain dances. Weather is strongly influenced by Earth resonant frequencies, the so-called Schumann frequencies. But those same frequencies are also produced in our brains, and when many people synchronize their thinking as individuals, change can occur. For instance, spiritual masters can focus their thoughts in a laser-like fashion, and then, scientifically speaking, it is not at all surprising that they can thus influence objects or even the weather. Wilhelm Reich created a weather control device, alternate cancer treatment, and much more based on the science of orgone energy. Bionic humans. The brain is the most complex organ in the human body. We take it for granted how easy it is to think a command for our body to move a limb, for example, and how quickly it responds. Of course, this is an easy task if you have legs, but what about making thought control real if you do not have legs? The answer is that bionic limbs can now be controlled by the human brain. For an amputee, when they think the thought, leg move, their artificial leg can move in the desired way. An amputee's brain interacts with a computer connected to sensors in the body, which enables the bionic limb to respond. This is the fusion of biology with technology. Thoughts can now move artificial limbs. The next step is to eliminate the body sensors altogether and replace them with brain neuron implants. We'll soon bypass robotics entirely, allowing brain signals to power limbs in the future. This will also allow the blind to see. Bionic eyesight is a camera download to a computer wirelessly, then back to the brain where it stimulates the retina. Brain signals will soon be implanted in the body. Implants on the retina will then detect neurons firing, sending feedback robotically to the brain. For the blind, it then sends visual images back to the brain. This technology will not just replace what is lost, it will make all of our body parts superior. The $6 Million Man TV show would be more realistically cost $6 billion today. Mind merging with a mechanical body part is becoming a two-way street. Targeted muscle reintegration carries a motor arm signal. Arm signals recorded by EMT signals, which are attached to chest muscles. These tap directly into the brain in the form of wavelengths and thoughts understood by a computer, including a sense of touch. Soon and without difficulty, these inventions will replace any body part and even perform much better than their natural counterparts. A man who does not eat food or drink water. An Indian yogi named Prahlad Jani shocked the medical community in 2009 when he announced that he has not eaten for 7 decades. For 2 years, until the summer of 2011, he was placed in rigorous testing until a conclusion was reached. The media in Asia announced that the ascetic had passed all medical tests that they could subject him to, and there was no doubt that Johnny did not eat any food or drink any liquids for 70 years. His case is a true human phenomenon. One of the main regrets of the scientists who studied him is that they discovered him at such an advanced age. "It's incredible," said one doctor, quote, "dozens of machines kept him under close surveillance. It seems that the biological processes taking place in his body are unprecedented. Never before in the history of modern medicine being recorded such anomalies." End quote. How did he do it? For one, it was observed that he hydrates through a hole in the palate. The old yogi does not need to drink water. He can hydrate by keeping water in his mouth for several minutes. According to his doctors, any man who does not eat or drink for 5 days usually enters a coma and dies. For him, the situation is the other way around. Quote, "If he would be forced to eat, food could kill him," end quote, said one of the 32 doctors who have examined him. The doctors are convinced that the old man is a true fountain of cures for many of the current diseases. It appears there are many superhuman abilities we can learn from the masters of India, as masterfully illustrated in the Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahasa Yogananda, where each chapter describes a different master with their own unique individual human power. Levitation. Scientists in the laboratory have levitated frogs, grasshoppers, and mice by means of powerful electromagnets utilizing superconductors, producing diamagnetic repulsion of body water. The mice became confused at first, but adapted to the levitation after approximately 4 hours, suffering no immediate ill effects. A number of different techniques have been developed to levitate matter, including the aerodynamic, magnetic, acoustic, electromagnetic, electrostatic, gas film, and optical levitation methods. But what about the human mental ability to levitate objects or one's own body? Levitation is an aspect of psychokinesis. Yogic masters claim that mystical levitation can occur as a siddhi, a Sanskrit term that can be translated as perfection, accomplishment, attainment, or success. Levitation can occur during higher levels of consciousness, such as mystical rapture, euphoria, or astral projection. In Buddhism, it is believed a master can levitate his body through intense spiritual meditation, which involves a completely focused state of mind. Psychokinesis and telekinesis are terms given to the ability to move or manipulate objects with the power of the mind. All of us already have these abilities and use them, at least unconsciously, because our thoughts and emotions influence and interact with everything in our environment. Our thoughts and emotions can have the real effect of manipulating energy, which is at the core of everything. To understand the object that we desire to move, we must first establish a rapport with that object. We must tune into it, as the Tibetan monks did to levitate boulders, that is, synchronize our own energy with the object. In this way, the object becomes an extension of ourselves, and moving it or affecting it in any way then equals moving a part of oneself with telekinesis. Telekinesis. Telepathy, along with telekinesis, comprises the main branch of parapsychological research. Many studies seeking to detect and understand telepathy have been done within this field. In 1977, the CIA-funded Stanford Research Institute, the SRI, was a paranormal research team that investigated remote perturbation, commonly called psychokinesis or mind over matter. The research was employed with the aim to sabotage an enemy or as a nuclear missile deterrent. Of the individuals tested at SRI, at least one person had allegedly perturbed sensitive test equipment and remote viewed the interior of a sensitive device. 2 individuals, Uri Geller and Ingo Swann, have demonstrated some of these paraphysical effect abilities under controlled laboratory conditions. The abilities of these individuals were submitted to rigorous scientific investigation. An anonymous source working in the alternative energy and transportation industry commented that, quote, actually, the US government security personnel became interested in Swann when he psychically remote viewed some of their well-hidden deep underground vaults and the contents thereof. This was when they approached SRI because they were finally truly scared about the reality of psychic remote viewing as a tool in the hands of the Soviets, end quote. SRI harbored concerns that the Soviet KGB might be interested in the work they were doing and always held it in the back of their minds that they could someday be kidnapped or worse. Cold War paranoia, not unfounded as this book suggests, was still in full bloom during the early days of psychic spy research. Uri Geller is famous for his public displays of using his amazing telekinesis powers. He has bent spoons from a distance for the scientific community and in front of live audiences. The fact that he was a showman should not lead to the assumption that he was faking his abilities. In April 2000, Arthur C. Clarke announced that he keeps his own door key that was bent by Geller. Furthermore, he indicated that he does not rule out the possibility of all sorts of remarkable mental powers. Clarke went on to say that there are even things like telekinesis and other psychic phenomenon that we do not know about. The American psychoanalyst Jules Eisenbud studied Ted Serios, who could mentally imprint detailed images on photographic film under carefully controlled conditions. Dr. Eisenbud came to the conclusion through his studies of Serios' abilities that, quote, man has in fact within him vast untapped powers that hitherto have been accorded him only in the magic world of the primitive, in the secret fantasies of childhood, and in fairy tales and legend, end quote. Some of the younger generation, specifically the Indigo Children, appear to have developed telekinesis quite naturally, along with the ability to, quote, see dead people, end quote. Some of these children often find that their bodies will no longer tolerate foods of lower vibration, and they are impelled to eat diets high in fresh organic fruits and vegetables. Let's assume there are human types outside of Earth. Human biological bodies on most planets, such as Earth, are usually engineered to live for an average of about 150 to 200 years. Yet the average human lifespan is barely half that. Earth is classified as a Sun Type 12 Class 7 planet within a solar system favorable to life, especially humans. Astronomers are now finding Earth-like planets in vast quantities all over the galaxy. If the numbers of planets with human life potential hold up, one estimate puts the Milky Way galaxy with 30 billion humans, with Earth home to 7 billion. No wonder there is such intense ET interest in Earth's development at this crucial moment in our evolution. That is, if, considering the age of the universe, humanoid bodies have existed in various forms throughout the universe for upwards of 1 trillion years. If other entities are nearly exact replicas of us, yet are far more advanced, wouldn't we all be hardwired the same way? Couldn't they have something very important to teach us, especially in the realm of mind expansion and all the advanced human abilities that might come with it? Could it be possible to communicate with other humans from other eons or dimensions by using mental images or telepathic thought, which can project directly into the mind of another being. This is called channeling and can extend over vast distances. Such superhuman abilities could mark the end to spoken language, but more importantly, open a huge amount of potential for what can be done with the power of our minds. Channeled information via ETs. If properly developed, channeling can be a natural form of communication between humans and beings of a higher intelligence. If your mind were continually filled with pictures, colors, and sounds, which is what it might be like to connect telepathically with another, you'd be able to see what they see. Telepathy is a dynamic means of interaction, much more precise than any spoken language on Earth. We've all heard the expression, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Well, therein lies the answer to the ultimate form of communication. With the transference of a dozen pictures or diagrams in as many seconds, huge amounts of information can be passed on to one another in a very short period of time. Channeling must always be completely voluntary between two or more parties, never forced or coerced, utilizing communication through emotion and thought rather than the spoken word. But the alien language has an extra dimension to it beyond the visual imagery, and that is sound. By adding color codes and a corresponding almost musical resonance to match and back up the pictures or icons, the ETs prevent their communication from being misread. It is worth mentioning here that this sound has a definite resemblance to some of our more melodic languages and musical tones of the Far East. Developing telepathy in all its various forms on a global scale with all people will become the macro superhuman ability of the future. Another form of ET communication appears to be the enigmatic crop circle phenomenon. Cutting-edge authentic crop circle research called fractal resolution imaging reveals that the designs are advanced pictograms and mathematical communications from another reality. As we've seen, some circles appear in a matter of minutes, sometimes during the pouring rain at night. Some have appeared in fields near space observatories or highly secured scientific installations. Many crop circle researchers are now convinced that they are indeed ET communications, in some way interacting telepathically with human imagery. Given such new ways of looking at ourselves and looking at higher intelligences in the universe interacting with Earth, it now becomes necessary to make an attempt to unify all the theories.